Hello, welcome everyone. It's just 7 o'clock now. So happy to see so many folks joining us this evening. My name is Cassidy with the Edmonton Public Library. We're probably going to give it about a minute or so before we jump right into things, give people a chance to join, make sure you're connected to audio and that you can hear me. Make sure that you're comfortable. That's important too. You cannot see because it's slightly blurry behind me, but unfortunately I have to sit at my desk and I keep promising I'm going to bring a blanket for these talks so I can at least be cozy while I'm watching. Yeah, it's like Valerie has. I need a blanket for work. That's a necessary thing. But yeah, get cozy. We will be getting started shortly. If anyone would like captions, if that would help you engage with the talk tonight, it is now auto-enabled, which I love. It doesn't need to be enabled by anyone. But if you've never turned them on, it's under the More option, or it looks like the ellipsis or dot, dot, dot onto your bottom menu. Or if you're on a phone, you have to tap the center to get the bottom menu. And then from the captions, that gives you a whole bunch of options. You can hit show captions, you can change the language, you can view a full transcript to look at later, all very helpful accessibility tools.
I love all the new accessibility tools that exist on Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom has been doing some good work. Like some of the updates recently have been pretty snazzy. I had a bit of a shock when I logged onto the web interface and it had suddenly changed on me, but it's all looks like good things so far.
Also big fan of the sound blocking. There is some great ability of Zoom to block out background noise. I live by a hospital and no one can ever hear the sirens going by, and it's great. I can hear them, I get very distracted, but no one on the audience can hear. So I just seem like I am just a very easily distracted person. So it's funny for the audience.
Yes. I work beside the book drop. If you've ever returned a book to the Strathcona Library, it has to come down a giant slide. It's very loud. Thankfully, you don't have to hear it, just I do. Always shocks me. Okie dokie. Yeah, it is already 2 minutes past 7, so let us jump right into things. Thank you again. A few folks have joined us since I did our first welcome. My name is Cassidy. I'm with the Edmonton Public Library out of the Strathcona branch, as I just mentioned, and I'm so pleased to partner with Future Energy Systems on this event. It has now been 2 years, almost, yeah, 2 full years, almost 3 years, right? Because we started, goodness, we started the beginning of 2020. Yeah.
3 years.
Who knows what year it is? I don't anymore, clearly. But I have enjoyed this partnership so much, and I'm excited for what the future may bring. Valerie and I are going to chat a little bit about that coming up. I am here as your tech support mostly. So if you need anything at all, please, I will be keeping an eye on the chat. You also have my email from all the reminders, and in that initial email was also my phone number. If you are stuck, you need help connecting, get in touch. I'm hanging out to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. I also am here to let you know that we have a handful of other speaker events we do at the library. If you would like to join us both in person or online, please check them all out at the link that is really long and awful, and I apologize for that, but takes you directly to speaker series in the chat. With that, I will pass it on over to Valerie for a land acknowledgement and to get us introduced to our speakers this evening.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. Hi, everybody. My name is Valerie Miller, and I am from Future Energy Systems. As Cassidy said, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, a land acknowledgement, get you situated for this talk, and then I'm going to pass it over to our amazing speakers. First thing, you probably noticed that we are recording. So we are recording this talk, but we are recording the speakers, Cassidy and myself, as well as the slides. So this will be posted on the Future Energy Systems YouTube channel, so that way you can catch up. You can share this with anyone who wasn't able to join us tonight. But if you choose to be on camera, don't worry, you will not be in the final video. Just wanted to let you all know that. So before we get started on our talk tonight, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the University of Alberta and the Edmonton Public Library is on Treaty 6 territory in Métis Region 4, which is a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant communities. And as we explore energy and energy systems, we also want to acknowledge all of the territories, communities, and peoples that have been essential partners in this work. We are truly grateful to have the opportunity to work, study, and live on this land. So as I said, I am from Future Energy Systems. If this is your first Energy Talks, welcome. Future Energy Systems is a research program at the University of Alberta, and it launched in 2016 with $75 million from the Government of Canada's Canada First Research Excellence Fund to help Canada transition to a low net carbon energy economy. So we focus on the multidisciplinary research that develops energy technologies of the near future, integrates them into today's infrastructure, and examines possible consequences for society, economy, and the environment. We also contribute to the development of solutions for challenges presented by current energy systems. There are over 100 research projects, over 150 researchers, and over 1,000 postdocs, grad students, and other highly qualified personnel. So we're pretty big, we're studying a lot of different stuff, and we're really excited today to explore urban heat islands. We do wish to remind current and future viewers that the opinions expressed by the speaker are not necessarily those of the Edmonton Public Library, Future Energy Systems, or the University of Alberta. And I'm going to introduce our speakers now. So Dr. Sandeep Agrawal is a professor and the director of the School of Urban and Regional Planning at the U of A. He's also an associate chair in the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences. His research interests vary from sustainable urban and rural planning, energy transition, and Indigenous issues to human rights. And Dr. Nilusha Welegedara is a postdoctoral researcher in the Urban Environment Observatory Lab at the University of Alberta. She earned her PhD in land reclamation and remediation at the U of A, and she currently conducts research on greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of urban heat islands in high-latitude cities at the neighborhood scale, so cities like Edmonton. And that was a great transition to our topic tonight, which is on urban heat islands. So I am going to pass it over to Sandeep and Nilusha. If you've got questions while we go, pop them in the chat and I will keep track of those. We're gonna wait till the end for a Q&A. So make sure you're just popping them in and I will grab those. And we're also gonna do some polls. So please get involved in our polls. All right, Sandeep and Nilusha, we're going to get your slides and we're going to pass it to you.
Okay, thank you, Valerie, for the introduction. I hope you can hear me okay. Valerie or Cassidy, thumbs up. Yeah, excellent.
We're good.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Edmonton Public Library and Future Energy Systems for organizing this event. And thank you all for joining this evening. I'm sure you could have done something else, but I appreciate you coming in for this. We also appreciate Alberta Eco Trust and the City of Edmonton for sponsoring this project. And we also received help from the Future Energy Systems that Valerie just talked about. So our topic is from hot to cold, urban heat islands are still in effect. So as you can see, the topic gives away a whole lot of things that we're going to say. And I know it's not so cold now, but it's going to get cold next week for sure. So anyways, let's get started. Nilusha, next slide, please. So here is a quick outline of our presentation, and I will start off and then I'll hand it over to Nilusha, and then I'll come at the end of the presentation. So we'll talk about what urban heat islands are, what are the impacts of urban heat island, in short UHI, why we decided to conduct this study and how we did it, what we wanted to find out. We did a survey of Edmontonians, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about some of the mitigation and adaptation measures. Next slide, please. So quickly about urban heat islands. So urban heat islands, in short, UHI, are islands of warmer temperatures in the urban areas compared to their rural surroundings. So UHIs have a direct relationship with urbanization and more with the climate change that's happening over the years. So you would see that as urbanization increases with built-up area, it begins to absorb more heat and store it within the city, and that is a leading cause of UHI. Also, with the increasing frequency and intensity of heat waves, along with climate change, the UHI effects are increasing as well. Next slide, please. So what are the impacts of UHIs in winter cities like Edmonton? So there are actually, it's a slightly mixed effect in a place like Edmonton. Of course, there are negative effects, particularly during summer months, which could, lead to increase of temperature, so much so that it could cause heat-related sickness, even mortality. Energy demand could go up, and water demand could go up, and obviously air pollution. There are some positive effects, especially when we speak of a high-latitude city, winter city like Edmonton. And one of those positive effects is that it can take some of the edge off the winter extremities. And obviously it could bring down some of the energy demand as well. Next slide, please. So among large Canadian cities, Edmonton has witnessed quite a bit of increase in its built-up area in the last few decades. And we have also seen heat-related illnesses that have increased over the years. What is predicted is by 2100, the number of days more than 30 degrees centigrade will triple. So those are some of the reasons that we wanted to look at Edmonton. And obviously, most of the studies that are done are about tropical cities, warmer cities, and not about high latitude cities like Edmonton. Next slide, please. So as we all know, Edmonton is North America's northernmost city with over 1 million people. It's located between 53 and 54 parallels and has 4 distinct seasons with 2 very different temperature extremes. So our study is done at the neighborhood level, and essentially we have relied on the neighborhoods as defined by the city of Edmonton. So we have looked at all 400 or so residential, non-residential neighborhoods. I will not get into the different, the types of neighborhood, but the ones that we have focused on is the one that you see in yellow, orange. These are the mature residential areas, which were mostly built in around 70s and 80s, but definitely prior to 2000. And the newly developed residential areas, which are maroon, dark maroon on the edges and the perimeter of the city. And the red ones are the industrial areas. So as we go along, you're gonna hear more about them. And the green ones obviously is the river valley and ravine areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where a poll question will come. So Cassidy or Valerie, if you could put up the poll. So here's a first poll for you. Do you feel warmer in your neighborhood during summer relative to other parts of the city? And you have 3 choices: yes, no, or maybe. So if you could take a few minutes and then we'll proceed to the next slide.
All right, you got 10 seconds left. All right, we are ending this poll.
Okay. All right, so results are 40% of you have said, yes, you do feel warmer in your neighborhood relative to other parts. 46% of you have said no, and about 17% have said maybe. So, you know, quite a few of you have said yes. So we'll see what we have in store for you as we move along, and we look at the different parts of the city, which one is warmer, which one is relatively cooler. So next slide, please. And Nilusha, you take it away.
Oh, Nilusha, you are muted.
Sorry. Thanks, Sandeep. So now I'm going to talk about how did we conduct this study. Normally, UHI studies are conducted using two methods. One method is using air temperature from weather stations, and another method is using surface temperature from satellite data. The limited weather station coverage in Edmonton didn't support us in using air temperature to do this neighborhood level study. So we conducted our study using satellite images. So this picture shows the satellite, how the satellite captured the surface temperature from structures and areas on Earth. On the Earth, when solar radiation absorbed by structures and areas, they increase the surface temperature and emit thermal radiation. As you can see here, satellites can record these surface temperatures using the thermal radiation. So by analyzing this satellite data, we can get land surface temperatures, as you can see in this image. Here we can identify hot areas and cold areas. According to the legend, the red areas indicate the warmer hot areas, and these green and blue areas indicate the cold areas. The advantages of using satellite images that they cover a very large area, so we can get values for a whole studied area. Also, satellites revisit the same place, so we can do long-term studies using satellite images. So we use Landsat satellite images that are captured from 2000 to 21. We considered all the seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring, to generate neighborhood surface urban heat island maps. So if you look at the methodology, we used to obtain the UHI map. So first we obtained the land surface temperature, as I described earlier. Then we took the neighborhood map, and then we calculated average land surface temperature of each neighborhood. Then, as Sandeep mentioned, urban heat islands are the difference between urban and rural area. To get rural area land surface temperature, we considered 10-kilometer buffer, outside buffer area from the building line in the city of the neighborhood. And then we calculate the average land surface temperature in this greenish area, the green dash area. Then we use those data to create surface urban heat island maps, as you can see here, for different seasons and over the 20-year time period. Then we did lots of statistical analysis. At the same time, we wanted to understand Edmontonians' opinions of the UHI phenomenon and its consequences and their recommendation to help mitigation the UHI effects. So we conducted an anonymous online survey. We circulated it using Community League, the City of Edmonton, and University of Alberta social media platform. So before going to the results, I would like to think whether your neighborhood is a hotspot. So we are coming to our results. So what did we find? So as you can see in these maps, these maps show the summer land surface temperature changes in Edmonton over the past 2 decades. So what we can clearly see that both the land surface temperature intensity that is indicated by different colors as mentioned in this legend, this intensity increase as well as the areas experience higher temperature increase over the past 2 decades. So this result shows that high latitude winter cities have significant UHI effects. So then we averaged the land surface temperature within the city area, and we found that the average land surface temperature of the city increased significantly over the last 2 decades, like from 1999 to 2005, there's a little reduction, but after that, it's significantly increased over the last, especially 15 years, we can see there's a significant increase. Then we wanted to look at what is the main effect? So what caused this temperature change? Then we look at the fractional vegetation cover changes over the past 2 decades. According to the legend, you can see these red areas indicate less vegetation cover, less than 1%, and green, more greenish, more vegetation cover, nearly 80 to 100%. So what you can see here, during last 20 years, vegetation cover significantly reduced because of the expansion of the city. Then we look at the major city area where vegetation changed to find out how much change over the last 20 years. So then we saw like 15% of the city's vegetation lost during last 20 years because of development of new neighborhoods and the Anthony Henday driveway. Then we look at urban heat island changes at neighborhood level. As you can see here, we took 5-year average values, and it indicates that the UHI intensity increased over the time, and the neighborhoods that experience UHI intensity also increased. So then we look at what kind of variation we can see if we take average neighborhood values. You can see the median value, that is 15% of the neighborhood experience higher UHI than this line. You can see it's increased over the time, as well as maximum is UHI increase over the last 20 years. Also minimum UHI value also increased over the past 2 decades. So we wanted to look at how a neighborhood we wanted to look at how SUHI changed across different seasons. So then we used different satellite images, and finally we ended up with these results. So what you can see here in the summer, all the neighborhoods, most of the neighborhoods experience higher SUHI intensity. Then winter has some second highest SUHI intensity, and fall and spring has less SUHI intensity. So then we wanted to look at, do all the neighborhoods experience similar SUHI intensity? If you can see here the red line, that the industrial areas, it has higher SUHI intensity compared to other neighborhoods in summer as well as winter. Mature neighborhoods follow the same thing. The most important thing is newly developed neighborhoods intensity, UHI intensity significantly increased over the last 2 decades, especially during the summertime. we saw less UHI intensity during fall and spring because we compare urban value, urban land surface temperature compared to rural. The rural areas mainly consist of agricultural lands during fall and spring. They are bare. They can absorb more heat during that time. Therefore, they are warming similar to urban areas. And another thing like what we can see here, the river valley area that is indicated by green line shows positive value during winter time, but negative value during all the other seasons. Then we wanted to look at what are the main factors that influence UHI. Our research showed that area covered by vegetation is the main driver that regulates summer SUHI intensity. We did some statistical analysis, so we can see some of the stats here. So mainly what we can draw from this relationship, if neighborhoods with lower vegetation covered showed higher SUHI intensity, and neighborhoods with higher vegetation cover showed lower SUHI intensity. Then we look at the effect of surface water bodies. We found that neighborhoods with more or near to water bodies showed lower summer SUHI intensity, whereas if there are no surface water bodies or not near to surface water bodies, it shows higher UHI intensity. Then we wanted to look at the effect of River Valley area, that is the largest urban park in Canada. As we mentioned before, River Valley showed specific pattern. To look at this cooling effect of River Valley more closely, we calculate the average surface urban heat island intensity of different buffer areas outward from the River Valley boundary during both winter and summer. So you can see here the results show that River Valley could significantly cool adjacent areas in summer as far as 1 kilometer on each side. However, the UHI intensity did not change much with the distance away from the river valley during the winter. These results indicate that river valley areas provide more cooling through the combination effect of vegetation and water bodies. Then we look at the effect of human-generated or anthropogenic heat sources on UHI intensity. But we found that when there are more open roads and population density and dwelling density, it increased the surface urban heat island effect. Also, the neighborhoods those are more compacted and have more dwelling density. That also increase in the UHI intensity. Also, research showed that the number of vehicles traveled in each neighborhood can influence the UHI intensity. And then we wanted to look at who got most affected. That we have found neighborhoods with more affluent and better educated residents experience lower UHI intensities because the neighborhoods with greater vegetation cover tend to be occupied by high income and highly educated city residents. In contrast, low income and dependent people live in low vegetation and high density neighborhoods, mainly consist of high rise apartment buildings that's surrounded by larger parking lots. We further analyzed the median household income data to understand how much more likely low income household would experience UHIs. Research showed that the average SUHI intensity in lower income neighborhoods is significantly higher than that of the high income neighborhoods. For example, neighborhoods with a median household income less than 60,000 experience 2.37 centigrade higher SUHI intensity than neighborhoods with a median household income greater than 120,000. Then we wanted to look at how vulnerable people get affected by UHIs. For that, we considered the elderly population percentage and kids population percentage because they are the more vulnerable for extreme heat conditions. However, we could not find higher SUHI intensity in neighborhoods with more of these two groups. Then we look at dependency ratio, unemployment rate, and parent household. And we found that the neighborhoods with high percentage of dependent unemployed people and one parent household experience higher UHI effects. These outcomes highlight environmental inequalities in Edmonton that need specific attention from the city authorities. So with that, I will pass back to the Sandeep.
Okay, thanks, Nilusha. So just going to summarize what Nilusha just talked about. So what we have found is that summer months obviously are much more much hotter. The intensity of UHI is much higher, but so is the case even during winter and early spring. Summer UHI effects obviously has significantly increased over the last 2 decades, so much so that some neighborhoods experience between 6 to 12 degrees higher land surface temperature when compared to the rural areas. And most of these neighborhoods are industrial areas and commercial areas, and some of the newly developed ones on the southern side of the city. Another thing you noticed in one of the slides is that the city's north side is much warmer compared to south side. So depending upon where you are located, you would probably feel much warmer if you're on the north side than on the south side. Nilusha mentioned that city's vegetation cover has gotten reduced by about 15%, and there is a corresponding increase of built-up area, which is one of the key factors in the increase of UHI. So what we have seen is that if we can increase the vegetation cover and water bodies, we will be able to reduce the UHI effect. So if it is 20%, if there's an increase in vegetation cover by 20% in each neighborhood, then that could possibly reduce the current UHI intensity by 1/3. The last one is the neighborhoods where more affluent Edmontonians live, better educated. They tend to experience lower UHI effects than neighborhoods where low-income Edmontonians reside. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is about the poll, the survey we conducted. And we asked a whole bunch of questions, but there are only 2 or 3 we're going to show here. So one of the questions was, what do they think of UHI? Meaning, are they familiar with the effect of UHI? And the result that we got was that close to about 70% of Edmontonians said that they understood and they were familiar with the UHI effect. Now, this may be slightly biased when the survey was conducted, because right at that time, there were a number of news pieces in the social media as well as on TV and radio, which was circulating around. So again, take it what it is. Okay, next slide, please. I believe it's a poll question coming up. Okay, so this is for you to answer. Select one thing you do or will do to reduce UHI effects. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Planting properly, caring for trees and other vegetation, use public transit, reduce electricity consumption, change the paved surface of your driveway or other parts of your property, or all the above. So
all right, you got about 10 seconds left. All right, we are ending this poll, and here are your results.
Excellent. So, well, I see no one is changing their surface, paved surface, or reduce the driveway, but 40% of you have said that you're going to do all the above, which includes, protecting trees, using public transit, reduce electricity consumption, as well as reduce the width and the length of your driveway. So this looks very promising. 26% of you talked about your trees and vegetation, 15% public transit, and about 20% about reducing electricity consumption. So that's great. That's great that you all are doing it or will be doing it, and all of it will help reduce the UHI effect in the future. All right, so we'll keep plugging along. So next question that we had in the survey was, what adaptive behaviors do respondents use to cope with extreme heat? So these are the results. Almost 99% of Edmontonians said they would seek shade, or they do seek shade, reduce going out, followed by following the heat notifications from the city. Some of you said that you would visit pool or do visit pools when there's when it's very hot, use of fountains, sprinklers, and such. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what Edmontonians in our survey said in regards to the question about what are the mitigation behaviors residents are engaged in. So 90%, almost 90% of Edmontonians said that they lower their furnace or air conditioner when leaving the house, followed by unplugging appliances. Some of you said take public transit, and very few of you said in that survey about tree planting, but there were more of you who were about tree planting in the poll that we just conducted. So this is all looking very, very good. Okay, so we have, I believe, another poll coming up. And this is to do with what should the city do? So select the top thing the city, that city of Edmonton, should do to reduce the UHI effect. So incentivizing green features like trees, encouraging green material, designs for building, preserve mature trees, educating public about UHI, and all the above. So we'll give you a minute or two to make your selection.
All right, you got 10 seconds left.
Okay, are you ready to share the results, Valerie?
They are shared. Can anyone see them?
Yep. I can see it now.
Ah.
All right. So 77% of you said all the above. So meaning incentivizing through taxes, encouraging green material, preserving mature trees, and education. So let's see what, these are all very good ideas, and let's see what, what we say in our next slide. Okay, so now let me start off by saying that incorporating mitigation measures is a little bit challenging when we speak of high latitude cities like Edmonton, where you see two opposite extremes of temperature. But local heat plans are important to be developed, policy guidelines with respect to heat latitude city, rather high latitude cities, increasing natural land cover like adding trees, protecting mature trees. City has just passed a ballot to protect mature trees in public properties, but we are advocating for the protection of trees even in private properties. Add surface water bodies to parks to cool the surroundings. River Valley, I think River Valley provides an excellent ventilation effect, and perhaps the new plans and policies need to take a better look at it and benefit from this great feature that we have. Cooling centers in downtown and other areas, a use of high reflective surfaces, because sidewalks and parking lots and driveways, they do absorb a lot of heat, and that results in higher UHI. And obviously the last one is to make sure that our city residents are aware of UHI phenomenon and not just. So the point here is that city policies so far are much more geared towards us being a winter city, but we argue and advocate for the fact that we are becoming both a winter city as well as summer months where we get very hot temperatures. So we need to account for both. Okay, next slide. I believe that's the end of it. And now we open it up for questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm going to give a round of applause because me and Cassie are the only ones you can see, but thank you so much, Sandeep and Nilusha. There's lots of hands clapping in the chat, on the pictures. Amazing. The floor is now open. The floor is yours to ask all of those questions. I definitely have a bunch, so I won't take over. I'll leave the space open, but feel free to pop your questions in the chat, or you can even raise your hand and ask yourself. The first question that we have is, what about tax incentives for solar from provincial and federal governments? And what about rooftop gardens or gray rain or gray water collection incentives? Can that play a role?
I can just say a few things and pass it on to Nilusha. Yes, I think those are great. I mean, solar is very important. As far as cool roof is concerned, as far as green roof is concerned, I think Nilusha could add a few comments on that. I believe they are not the best solution for a city like Edmonton. Go ahead, Nilusha.
Thanks, thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, green roofs and reflective roofs are not good for winter cities because that's like we have two temperature extremes. So in the summer we have to reduce UHI, but during winter it's giving some benefits. The main thing, like they have found, like if we now we are getting lots of snow, so if we add another layer of soil to do garden vegetation, it gives lots of burden to the roof. So it's we are getting lots of snow, it can wet, and so it's not good. Also during winter, some reflectives, like it might not work, snow already there, and like so it's it found those two are not suitable for winter cities, but it's very applicable for tropical or low latitude cities. But for winter cities, like we have two temperature extremes, so cool roof and green roofs are not very good measures.
Thank you so much. Yeah, all of those, all that snow weight, definitely a challenge on flat roofs. And when it comes to solar, we're definitely seeing more solar coming out. We got lots of research at the U of A, and we're definitely seeing more solar happening. Thank you so much for that question. Another question is, would more outdoor pools help with combating UHIs? You talked about bringing in more water bodies. Do pools count as water bodies? Yeah. I'm seeing nodding, so maybe yes.
Nilusha, you can answer. Did pool account for water bodies when you did the
For when we are looking for satellite images, it covers 30 by 30 meter area. So if it's bigger than 30 meter by 30 meter area, we have that in our analysis. But if it's less than that, small pools might not include it. But at local scale, we can have more pools like to because it's giving cooling effects to surrounding area. But for our analysis, if it's greater than 30 by 30 meter, it might capture it.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess that a pool would play a role in it. Was it your mitigative or your adaptive measures, because it's an ability to cool yourself down? So it might not show up in your data, but on an individual scale, it could play a role. Awesome, thank you for that question. We have another question. First, a compliment, so thank you for the presentation. But the next question is, do you have any suggestions about what sort of protections are needed for private trees? What do you think about current tree protection bylaws? You mentioned that as something that the city should do. Sandeep, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Sure, no, I'll take this on. So I believe last year the tree protection bylaw was approved, but it only applies to the trees in the public domain, not on private lots. So I'm an advocate of protecting trees, no matter where they are. Trees don't grow based on who owns which part of the land. So that's one. Second is what sort of protection? So I'll give you an example. I came to Edmonton 10 years ago from Toronto, and I was very much involved in Toronto's bylaw crafting and design. So even back in early 2000, City of Toronto had tree protection bylaw, which applied to both public and private properties. And essentially, any kind of development, however minor or major that may be on a private lot, had to go through Urban Forestry Department of the City of Toronto. And to ensure the department that no tree would be, or tree roots would be ruined or will get affected by the new development. And if the tree had to be cut because of whatever reason, then the city used to supply 2 sort of plants for the property owner to put on their property. So I think that's a very good bylaw that the City of Toronto has still. And I think City of Edmonton should look at that.
Awesome, thank you. Dipali, I see your hand up. Did you want to ask your question? I see your hand raised. Did you have a question? All right, we'll jump back to you. Okay, yes, I can see you in the chat that you're saying yes. Feel free to turn your mic on, or you can type it in the chat and I will say it. Okay, I'm gonna give you a chance to type it in the chat, and then we'll jump back to your question. While we wait for your question, the next one we have is related to how you collected your data. So Nilusha, you mentioned that it's, I think, 30 meter by 30 meter points. That's the detail of the satellite. Do you have to do any ground truthing with that data to make sure the data, like, you know, which areas are kind of the urban, the mature, the newly developed? How do you kind of ground truth your data?
Actually, we used Google Earth maps. Also, sometimes we visited to some of the sites. Yeah, we did some of the ground truth, like validation of the areas. We did some of the points, and yeah, mainly we used that also Google Earth maps to validate the data.
And just to add to you, Nilusha, we use the data from the temperature data from the 6 weather monitoring stations, plus purple layer data, right?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I couldn't mention, yeah. So we got the main issue, like the air temperature, weather stations are located at the fringe of the city area, but we use that data to validate our satellite images, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And Brianna, I can see your comment that you are creating art to raise awareness for urban heat islands. So that is amazing. If anyone wants to check out that link, you can see that in the chat. Dipali, I see your question. So you mentioned that the number of dependents negatively affects UHI. How would work from home affect UHI?
I can I can try to tackle this. So work from home, meaning perhaps less travel, less air pollution, hopefully less greenhouse gas emission. But what the other side, flip side of it is that more and more people are buying bigger houses. And that takes, those bigger houses take a lot more energy to the heat or to cool them down. So I don't know, I'm sitting on the fence on that one. But Nilusha, do you want to add anything to this?
Like what Sandeep said, like maybe like for example, it reduced anthropogenic heat emissions, so it can affect reducing, but in long term, it's good. It reduces greenhouse gas emission. But as Sandeep said, if we are at home and we use energy for heating and cooling, and that might also have some the increase in. So like we have to do more studies exactly to find out exactly how it affects on UHI.
Absolutely. Polly mentioned that work from home means that more homes might not be reducing their temperatures during the day. So that could have that impact, especially if you've got some people still in the office and some from them at home, and then you have raised temperatures in both places.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely something for us to keep looking at. Thank you for that question. So many questions flying in. I love this. So what is the plan? What plan is the city doing for replacing elm trees lost due to Dutch elm disease and trees that are shorter lived like birch? You do not work for the city, but do you guys have any idea of what the city is doing? No? Okay. So something
No
to ask the
idea.
city about what we do regarding the trees that are being lost. Absolutely.
So
How?
one thing I can add, Valerie, if I may,
Absolutely.
that city has decided to increase their tree canopy cover. There is a program out there to increase the number of trees in the city. So I think they have an aim to add 1 million more trees or things of that in nature. So a lot of it is happening. But again, I don't know the exact answer vis-a-vis the elm trees and birch and so on.
Awesome. Thank you for that detail. The next question is, how is the city connected to the Root for Tree incentive group? Is it sponsored by the city? And Cassidy mentioned in the chat, yes, that is a city program. Root for Trees. It's a City of Edmonton volunteer tree planting program. So if you're interested in getting involved in tree planting, I believe the city marks out different areas that are looking for trees, and you can pick up saplings and you can be part of a planting group. So it's definitely worth checking out. You can see that in the chat.
Yes, I'll just add the 2022 planting season is now complete. I was actually just chatting to the Root for Trees folks, so this is one I'm uniquely ready to answer. In March 2023 is when they'll be starting up for the new year. So if you're interested in taking part of that, check out the Root for Trees page in March. It's a pretty cool project if you've never been involved. They sort of map out where you can, they supply everything you need, and the folks who do it are very, very passionate about the project.
Absolutely. And I think that leads to a great next question. And I don't know if you guys went into this level, Ida, but maybe you can provide some thoughts. Does the type of vegetation matter? Whether it is lawns versus forests versus shrubs, does that vegetation matter? And then compare that to water. Is one better than the other?
Nilusha, you want to add to it? I think trees are a lot better than bushes and shrubs and grass and so on. But go ahead, Nilusha.
Yes, thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, that's right. Trees can give a bigger effect compared to lawns because normally trees can give shade and also evapotranspiration, like normally cooling the surrounding area through three process, providing shade, evapotranspiration, and reflecting some of the solar energy. So trees are the best. They can cool more areas and they provide shade. For example, if you park your vehicle under a tree in summer, and if you park your vehicle in an open park, you will clearly see the difference. So I have practically look at that, like we need more energy to cool like we have to use a lot of energy to do air condition if we park in the parking lot without any tree cover. But if we park under tree, you don't need much energy. So the trees are giving very big effect compared to lawn, but lawns also better than other man-made structures like concrete and asphalt because they can do some evaporative cooling and cool the surrounding area. Also, they can reflect some solar energy.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for that question, everybody. One of your graphs, I think Nilusha, you presented it, was all about the seasonal difference between the impact on different neighborhoods. Why is there a seasonal difference between summer and winter and spring and fall between these different neighborhoods? Why is it that the season causes that behavior to change?
So you go, Sandeep. Or...
You go ahead, Nilusha.
Yeah, actually, mainly in the summer, we know the daytime length is very high, so we are getting solar energy around like 15 to 17, sometime in summer solstice around 17 hours, we are getting solar energy. So buildings can absorb more solar energy and then increase the temperature of the surface as well as surrounding areas. So in summer, we see very high intensive UHIs. UHI intensity is very high. As well as in rural areas, they have mainly consist of forested areas as well as the croplands. So when there are crops, they reflect more solar energy and cool the surrounding area. Because of that, we see higher UHI intensities during summer because of those two reasons. And for winter, mainly because buildings absorb solar radiation and increase temperatures. Surrounding rural areas definitely cool, and because vegetation cover is covered by the snow. But we have found in our study if there are forested areas, so forested areas behave in a significant way. For example, summer they cool, but in winter those areas are warmer. So in two opposite way. So this also affect on difference for the UHI during winter. And fall and spring, the surrounding areas like rural areas, not the stage of crop is effect on warming the rural areas. So for example, in the spring, little plants there, so the lands absorb more solar radiation, so we can see little difference between urban and rural areas. during fall, after harvesting, most of the land areas are bare, they can absorb more solar radiation. So it increased temperature, so we see little difference. That's the mainly cause for differences between seasons. Can I add something, Sandeep?
Awesome. And then Kenneth and I were in our chat, we're like, one of those graphs, I think it was this summer one, talked about how mature neighborhoods had a higher urban heat island effect than newly developed neighborhoods. And we were both surprised that mature would be higher than newly developed. Why is that? We would have thought that mature neighborhoods had more mature trees than newly developed. So why are we seeing that pattern? This one's from me. I was very curious.
Actually, in the mature, here we considered all the neighborhoods that built prior to 2000, but within the mature neighborhoods, we can see a difference. For example, mature neighborhoods with more canopy, the mature trees, they are cooler compared to other neighborhoods that has low vegetation cover. We took the average of that. So you see, that's why there's a higher value than newly developed one. And the main thing is like a newly developed one, there are more plot sizes. So there's a more time to heat release into the atmosphere. But some of the mature neighborhoods, especially around downtown area, they have very less surface area to release heat, and some are reflecting back, so it's increased the temperature. So that also affecting on that pattern.
Makes sense, because I was thinking the area of our lovely library, Strathcona and Garneau, is a mature neighborhood, but it's quite green and a lot cooler than some of the more densely populated areas around us. Awesome.
Yeah, so you can clearly see, like, if there are no trees, it's very high temperature. You can literally feel the difference. Like if you enter into the areas has more mature trees. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sandeep.
Yeah, just the example that you took, Valerie. So mature neighborhoods that are closer to the ravine system, the North Saskatchewan River and the valley and such, they tend to have more greenery, more trees, and they have much lower temperature than the rest of the mature neighborhood. So again, back to Nilusha's point about the variations within mature neighborhoods. But in the case of the newly developed, they all are heating all at the same time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if you want to see us go on an adventure in the Garneau and Strathcona neighborhood to find where it's really hot and really cool, you can check out the video in the chat. Nilusha and I went wandering down 109th Street, measuring temperature, and it was very hot on 109th. And as soon as we entered the river valley, I think it was like 15 degrees cooler. It was big. It was one day of just, this is exactly what we're talking about. Awesome. So next question, they're just still flying in. Does the color of roof shingles affect UHI? So is that something you talked about earlier, having more reflective surfaces? Does the color of roof shingles matter? We're seeing nods. Yes, it does. Absolutely.
I would say yes, but I'm not an expert in color, but some colors may be more reflective than others. Nilusha, do you have any opinion?
Actually, like the more darker the color, they absorb more solar radiation. Like we said, albedo, that's means reflectance of the solar radiation. The dark, like that's why as far, like for example, road, you see like there's a higher temperature compared to the nearby areas. So if darker the color, they can absorb more. If lighter the color, they reflect more. So there's a effect of the color of the roof. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for that great question. So we're back to trees because everyone loves trees. Would you recommend a residential tree requirement bylaw? Is that something that we should be looking at? So I guess more than just protection of trees, but having trees.
Is that what the question is?
Not sure. Dipali, please correct me if I'm wrong, a bylaw for residential tree requirements.
Yes, especially in newer neighborhoods where existing trees were taken down in developing that neighborhood. And the developer will have a requirement for 5 shrubs or 1 tree or whatever in the front of the house, but there's nothing for the back. The backyard is often too bare. And would you recommend that the city insist on people planting trees in the backyards too? And sometimes recommendations are not enough from the city. Maybe a bylaw would be helpful.
Yeah. No, thanks for that clarification, Dipali. See, my view around bylaws is that it should not make things more onerous on property owners. I think cities should incentivize, cities should encourage and promote tree planting rather than requiring more trees to be planted. It should protect existing trees. It should ask for replacing existing trees, but I would not go as far as to require so many trees and so many in the backyard or so many in the front yard.
That's where that education component, that awareness component really comes out, rather than requiring, bring out that knowledge side. Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. Sandeep, I think this next question is probably for you, but Nilusha, feel free to jump in. You talked about adaptive behaviors and mitigation behaviors. Are those impacted by neighborhoods, by income, by some of those characteristics that you looked at when it comes to UHI?
So, Nilusha, you help me out. Did we ask for people's
No, we
neighborhood?
didn't ask income level actually in the survey. Yeah, so we didn't look at the income and relationship between income and the mitigation measures. So we didn't ask the average income.
We did ask for the location, but I think it was not evenly distributed. So we took that part out, and that's why we did not present income or location. We didn't present. But it's a very good question. But I can say one thing in not related to this study, but another study that we did, that let's say just the use of solar roofs and things of that in nature, they're much more prevalent in affluent neighborhoods than other neighborhoods. So there is certainly an income component here.
All right, thank you. We'll have to have you back in like a couple of years once you've done more of the study and we can find out how things have shifted. Awesome. So you can keep popping your questions in the chat if you have any more, but they have just been flying in. The next question that we had was, why is it more difficult to manage UHIs in higher latitude cities? You mentioned that near the end, that it is more challenging. Why?
Just a short, quick answer. I mean, our conventional knowledge about putting green roof or cool roof may not work in a high latitude city. So we'll have to think about other measures. Trees are always good, no matter which city we are talking about, where they are located, same as water bodies, but anything else, I think, or, reflective services and such. But in regards to some of the other measures which are in place, let's say in Toronto requires any building surface of more than 10,000 square feet to have a green roof, irrespective of the use, whether it's residential, industrial, or commercial. Now, if City of Edmonton has to adopt or adapt that measure, I think it needs to do a bit of a study to see if it's going to work in the case of Edmonton. So yeah, so those are some of the differences that exist with respect to a city like Edmonton.
And just one thing also, like some of the winter design can exacerbate UHI effects. Some of the UHI mitigation can exacerbate cooling effects. Like, for example, where to keep heat, we need, like, for example, for the winter design, we are trying to take more heat into the buildings. But during summertime, it's increased the temperature inside. So some of that also affect on winter cities.
Darn us having 4 seasons and having to adapt to all of them. All right, great question. They're just more flying in. Would district energy systems have an impact on UHI? Any thoughts on that as a potential solution or part of a solution?
I think so. I think it will be helpful in mitigating UHI. But we haven't done the study, but I definitely think that it will help. Blatchford is trying that out, and perhaps that could be our next study to see, what the level of UHI is in Blatchford, for instance.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Again, we're jumping back to trees. Big tree fans. Trees are good. Does your research suggest that coniferous or deciduous trees might be better? I don't think you guys necessarily went to that level in your data collection, but any thoughts?
Nilusha?
Yeah, actually, for winter cities, deciduous trees are better because we try to maximize UHI benefits during winter while reducing penalties in summer. So if you have deciduous trees, like but we need to find out the suitable place for that. Then during summer, it can give shade, can reduce the energy requirement for cooling and cool the houses. But during winter, it can shade leaves and give more solar radiation into house, giving more space to enter solar radiation. So deciduous trees also much better, but coniferous trees also giving other benefits like windbreak. They can act as a windbreak during winter, also prevent much cooling of some of the areas. So finding right place to plant trees also important.
Awesome. Thank you. Again, more trees are awesome. If you see the next comment in the chat, it's trees are awesome. In a prairie climate, how do we go about creating new open water bodies? You mentioned that as one piece of your advice is to add more water bodies. How do we go about doing that in our kind of climate?
Yeah, I can try this. So if you look at the new neighborhoods, one of the ways it's being done, not from the point of view of UHI, but now it's a requirement by the city to have stormwater ponds, right? To manage stormwater, and those areas then could act as, open water bodies. And many of them, if you go to Summerside or some of the other neighborhoods, you see a lot more stormwater management bodies than in the mature neighborhood. So hopefully over time they would help out in cooling the temperature down.
Absolutely. Stormwater ponds are valuable for a lot of reasons, but that is one I didn't think about. Absolutely. So we are jumping to the idea of infilling. So we are seeing a lot more infilling in mature neighborhoods, and those mature trees have been decreased as we start doing infilling. How can these trees be protected as the city starts to prepare to change zoning requirements and relax controls on buildings allowed in residential neighborhoods? So how do we balance kind of two different challenges with this?
Yeah, I mean, both can coexist, trees and new buildings. So I think city, as I've been saying, city needs to bring a bylaw that protects trees on private properties while continuing with the infill policy. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. All right, we are coming down to our last few minutes, so get those questions in so that we can ask them for you. The next question we have is, can you explain the correlation between income and UHI exposure? Are people with greater incomes able to undertake mitigation measures, or is it related to the value of property?
My short answer is both, but Nilusha, do you want to take this on?
Yeah, maybe value, like if more I don't have much knowledge about the value of the land area. So yeah, maybe if they are more green area near to river valley, they are expensive. So the value also affecting. So yeah, both.
More questions to ask in the future, absolutely. Dipali, I see your hand up. Did you have another question?
No, I wanted to respond to the current one. When we got our solar panels put up, and I talked to my students and colleagues about it, they questioned about whether the solar incentives that the government levels of the different levels were offering, were they directly deducting whatever the incentive value, or was it that homeowners had to prepay and then be reimbursed? So that makes me think that those people that were not in a financial bracket that could prepay for any of these mitigation measures, even if they want to take those steps, and even if there are incentives, they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dipali, and I can tell you from my own experience. This is 2015-16 when NDP government had some incentives, and we changed our what are they called, the water heater tanks to tankless water heater. So we had to pay everything up front, and we didn't get a government check until like 2 years later. So yeah, so one has to shell out, or has the ability to shell out that much of money upfront before you get any subsidies from the government. The other thing is there are other costs as well, you know, especially with the federal incentive, you have to get the home inspection, the home energy audit done. There's a cost to that. Then at the beginning, then at the end, once you know things have changed, and then there is some formula they use in terms of how much energy efficient the house has become. So yeah, there is certainly an upfront cost to the homeowner before any of the government check or subsidy kicks in.
All right, thank you so much for that. All right, we are entering our last couple of questions. We want to make sure you get out of here on time. So our second to last question is, what can we use this for? Are we looking at using this data for changing our current communities or designing new communities in the future, or both?
I think it's for both existing communities as well as building new communities which are much more climate friendly, where we can mitigate the rising UHI effect. I think this study is very important and one of the very few done on a high latitude city where the policies have been more geared towards looking at city from winter perspective and not so much from the summer perspective. So our study sort of, brings this perspective of the fact that the winter cities, or so-called winter cities, are getting warmer and warmer and hotter during the summer months, and the city policies and guidelines, whether they are about buildings or subdivision planning or what have you, they need to account for both, because these cities are not just winter cities, but they have two extreme temperatures running through them now, and it's going to become more and more extreme as we go along with the climate change.
Absolutely. Dipali, did you have another question, or is that from before? Sorry.
No, it is a new question.
Yes, go ahead.
How does Edmonton compare to similar high latitude cities in Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dipali. We haven't done the comparison, but I would also say that some of the other Scandinavian countries we have looked at, none of the cities there has 1 million population. They're much smaller, maybe about 500,000 or something. But yeah, I think the next stage would be to compare it with other cities at similar latitude. But thank you for that question.
Awesome. Again, we'll just have to have you back in a little while and find out the new information. All right, last question for tonight. I know we could keep going forever, but what is the thing you want us to leave thinking about? What's that key message you want people to know when it comes to UHI that we can take out into our own networks as we leave tonight? I don't know if you each have one you'd like to share.
I'll just say plant more trees, protect trees, both on public properties and private properties. Trees, trees, trees.
Amazing. All of the trees. Nilusha, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I echo what Sandeep said, like we need more trees. That's the best solution we can have. Like now it says like northern cities, like northern areas are warming twice that of the equator, like some around cities around equator. So it's warming at higher rates. So we will experience, it's expected to have more heat waves in coming years. So we need to get prepared for that, and need to get some idea about UHI and prevent as much as heat-related illnesses and deaths. And yeah, so need to think about that. Like if there are extreme heats, we should do some mitigation and adaptation measures to reduce the negative effects of that, and need to plant more trees, as Sandeep said. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, on the message of plant more trees, so many more trees, we are going to wrap up for tonight. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Nilusha. Again, huge round of applause. You can only see me and Cassidy, but we are giving you a giant round of applause. You can see lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you for coming today. This was such an interesting talk. Thank you to our audience for your endless questions. I loved it. It was great. So many great questions, so much great discussion. I don't know if you both saw in the chat how much discussion was happening around these topics. It was wonderful. You will also see in the chat quite a few links that we have shared to different work that Sandeep and Nilusha have done. Cassidy has collected all of those links and will be sending you one final email, just one final email with those links, a survey, so you can let us know what topics you want to hear about in the future, and any other links that I shared for Future Energy Systems. Please consider signing up for the Future Energy Systems newsletter so that you keep getting updated on talks like this. We will be planning our 2023 season. Feels like I'm talking about a movie or a television show, but no, we're talking about Energy Talks 2023. So that way you can keep up to date and find out what all these new topics are that we are sharing with the library. And who knows, we might be back in person, we might be online. Let us know in the survey how you want to hear these talks so that we can make it best for you. Remember to check out all the other talks that Cassidy shared earlier, because there are some amazing talks coming up. And we will see you all next time. Cassidy, anything from you?
Nothing to add. I think you got it all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nilusha and Sandeep. It was really engaging, and clearly everyone else thought so going by questions.
All right. Well, thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.